first one we'll talk with, and we share experiences from mini-grids, and then we'll talk about solar home systems and standalone services. And in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of innovation coming up from the humanitarian space in mini-grids, and also in the energy access space more widely in terms of mini-grids, operations, the way the operations are done, financial model, maintenance, private sector, public, all working together. And we want to put the humanitarian sector into this. But we still need this mix of solutions. We are doing a study for the World Bank looking at displacement in the Sahel, and the least cost option to reach displacement is met by mini-grid only by 14%. So it's an important part of the response, but clearly only part of it. So in this session, which we're starting in a second, we are really exploring what's the mini-grid role in this mix of electricity for refugees. And I think the important 3 questions we want to explore are: in what conditions are mini-grids a viable option to electrify humanitarian operations, refugee energy needs, and surrounding communities, also considering the temporary nature of many camps? What's the role of private sector, of humanitarian organizations, government, and development organizations in doing this, and how that differs across the different contexts? And what are the models of ownership, management, operations, and delivery of electricity from mini-grids in displacement? So today we're looking at some lessons and models to replicate and hopefully scale up across the humanitarian and energy sector. And of course, always keeping in mind the importance of the difference of those contexts and their own socioeconomic and political conditions. So we have 4 speakers from 3 projects. So the first one is Richard Mori from Mesh Power, mini-grid operator in Rwanda. Then we have Emmanuel Azimor from Mercy Corps, together with Eva Azidemu from Shell, and they will talk about an anchor client SBF model in Ethiopia-Somali region. And finally, we'll have a presentation from Kevin Mwagi from GIZ, talking about the mini-grid in Kakuma. So we start with Richard. You have 5, max 7 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Thanks for the introduction. Yep, so my name is Richard Murray. I'm the CEO of Mesh Power. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project in the Mahama refugee camp. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So Mahama is a refugee camp that was founded in 2015 and currently hosts over 50,000 refugees from Congo and primarily Burundi. We were approached by Alight, which was formerly the American Refugee Committee, to provide a solar system to help wean them off their reliance on diesel. So Alight are responsible for the clinic in the camp, and at the time they were building a new maternity ward addition to it, and it was seen as a perfect opportunity to green their operations. But there was a second aspect to it, in that they wanted to share the benefit with the community. They wanted to share the benefit of clean power with the camp inhabitants. So we designed a project where phase 1 would be to install a solar system to augment the diesel generator at the camp offices. And then we would expand power to the market to provide productive use power to refugees. I don't know what's happening with the presentation, but it's okay. The presentation is not very good. So, oh, here we go. Thank you. So next page, please. So the original aim of the project, firstly, of course, to reduce the reliance on diesel. At the time, they were spending about $1,000 every month on diesel. The second is to promote economic development through the provision of electricity and other productive use support. And the third is to demonstrate a sustainable and scalable model, thank you, for camp electrification. So the third one is key. If we go to the next slide. The partners in the project were Alight, of course, who were the initiator of the project, and they are our key humanitarian partner, and they drive everything about the project. And then we brought on board Imperial College London and Strathmore University as research partners. Finally, the project itself was funded by donors in the US and by research funding from Imperial College. So the third part is key. That isn't scalable, that's not sustainable. You can't provide a long-term scalable solution just funded by donors. But this was meant to be a demonstration. So we wanted to collect the data from this project to demonstrate a viable business case that we can then scale in other contexts. But we did not sort that from the very beginning. At the very beginning, we got the donor funding, we had the research partners, we were focused on the impact of electrification for the people in the market. That's where the research came in. So if we go to the next slide. Phase one of the system is just a PV system, 18.36 kilowatt peak, 30 kVA inverters, 80 kilowatt hours of battery bank. And the original 20 kVA diesel generator is still used as a backup on an automatic starter. Now, we did the best with the funding that we had available. This was never meant to be 100% powered by solar. But actually, as the months passed, as the years passed, demand increased impressively. It's about 50% higher just for the camp management facilities than it was back when we started. And this was due to additional equipment, additional appliances, things like autoclaves and incubators for the maternity center. Then phase two, on the next slide. We wanted to extend power to the market. So it was only about one kilometer distribution line with street lighting down the main road for community benefit. And we connected only about 12 connections, which is limited by the surplus power we were expecting to be generated by the system. And so this part was to evaluate the demand and then create a structure long-term to receive more investment to scale the system. This system was always meant to just be the beginning. But like I mentioned, one of the challenges was we came into this project with the donor funding. We installed the solar system, and we cut diesel costs by 90%. Fast forward a year. During that year, we were unable to enter the camps because of COVID restrictions, so we are unable to connect the market connections. And UNHCR has, of course, reduced the budget for diesel because the diesel consumption has gone down. But due both to the increase in demand at the clinic itself, as well as increased demand from the connections, diesel consumption goes back up again. And while we figure out the situation, we've reached an intermediate solution. We split the cost for the diesel. But long term, Alight and ourselves are going to UNHCR with a proposal to take over energy provision, be fully responsible for diesel. But this will also mean UNHCR would have to pay for electricity to make the system sustainable. And the model that we are looking to replicate and propose is that UNHCR is the anchor client. And by providing energy to the market, to the health center, to the camp management offices, to the police station, to NGO offices, that anchor load provides the economic viability of the project. And then we can use that money to actually provide street lighting and productive use connections in the market. I'm not convinced it makes economic sense to connect everyone in the camp to a large AC minigrid. That would cost a prohibitive amount of money. So our long-term proposal is to provide either DC minigrids or solar home systems for households while providing AC power and productive use equipment to the markets. And I think that's the best, let's say, sweet spot in terms of financial viability and impact. Next slide, please. So finally, some of the challenges. Huge camp access delays, especially with COVID. We were, like I said, over a year between installing the system and actually being able to connect businesses. And then the second point is the limitation of the donor model when dealing, there's a typo there, when needing to scale up. And so this is a phase we are in now, where we're reevaluating the project and coming up with a model that we can present to UNHCR and international funders, and then scale up this project and then other projects as well. Thirdly, there is the importance of a strong humanitarian partner. And for us, Alight was critical at every stage and really enabled this project to happen. As a private developer, the most difficult thing about working in the camps really is access and how to deal with all the agencies involved. And Alight, being our key partner in this project, actually makes that relatively easy for us. So thank you very much. I don't think that was too long.
Thank you, Richard. Brilliant and great to see a private developer talking about mini-grids in Humanitarian. This didn't happen, I think, 5 years, 10 years ago when we first met as a group. So great. Now we move on to another very different project and model between Mercy Corps and Shell, and give the floor to Emmanuel. please.
Thank you very much, and I'll be presenting with my colleague Eva, and today we want to present to you our Enter-Energy model in Ethiopia. Enter-Energy is a partnership between Mexico and Shell, which discussion started around 2018, and the main goal is really to test and scale a market-led, a private sector-led model for humanitarian energy service provisions. And we decided to choose Ethiopia as our pilot site. And so today we'll go through that and see how far we have been on this 2-3 years journey. So why Ethiopia? Ethiopia has one of the conducive environments, especially for refugee inclusion. The government is very much interested in this, very committed to the CRF. We know there are about 4.7 million refugees currently in this country. There's really a huge need for energy access in this particular setting. Yeah, in Ethiopia, we decided over the past 3 years, having studied the regulations, we've invested a lot of time in this. First of all, apologies for the shiftings in all the presentations and the logos, but the content is quite valid. So in Ethiopia, we have a two-phased approach. With our first phase, we intend to develop mini-grid solutions as well as standalone solutions for humanitarian actors. Within phase one, our pilot site, which is Jijiga, we are developing a solar mini-grids, about 230 kilowatt peak for energy for household and productive uses. So one of the underpinning issues of Enter-Energy is driving livelihoods, driving productive uses of energy, because we see that as critical to the model, the financial sustainability of the model, and also improving incomes at the household level. So in phase one, we start off with Shedder. Shedder will come on stream, and then we also, as part of phase one, provide captive use power to some UN agencies and also Mercy Corps offices in the Somali region. We also believe in this model, and we want to be the first beneficiaries or the first users of this. During phase two, when we have really learned quite a lot about the operations of this model, we intend to scale to other parts of the Somali region in the Dolo Ado area to see how best we can connect other households in one of the 5 Mekaldida camps, and also looking at expanding the footprint or support to humanitarian partners to come on stream as key anchor clients, as Richard has really mentioned. Next. Our financing model is, I would say, very simple. Having studied the regulatory environment, and just to know that Ethiopia is not one of the easiest places to do business. So we believe if this could work in Ethiopia well, maybe it could work elsewhere as well. We have decided as part of the regulatory environment to establish an SPV, private sector SPV, which pools funding from both philanthropic and commercial sources. So we have actually established that SPV in Ethiopia currently. It's called Human PLC. I'm sure you've picked some brochures this morning around that. So this Human PLC has already received about 3 million worth of investment from Mercy Corps as the majority shareholder, and also from a private investor in Ethiopia, which formed the capitalization for the company. From this Human PLC will basically design, finance, and construct energy infrastructure, mini-grids, captive systems for humanitarian facilities and operations. In addition, part of this funding will go to engineer livelihood activities, looking at productive uses of energy at the community level, at the household level, so that at least we are meeting the total kind of energy needs of a typical community. Of course, clean cooking is not left out in this model as well. Next, and welcome, Eva.
Thanks, Emmanuel, and just like to continue and give a bit of context and background to the project, because what Emmanuel explained didn't, of course, happen overnight. As Emmanuel said, this has been the result of a partnership between Shell and Mercy Corps over the last 3 years. And basically, we spent a lot of time behind the scenes laying the ground, creating the building blocks that supports the structure that Emmanuel just outlined. And probably the key things to highlight in terms of building blocks that we recommend everybody who's considering something along these lines is to make sure you understand the regulatory environment. Very important, in particular, the nexus of displacement settings, energy access, and private sector investment in a country like Ethiopia was very important for us to understand. Another point we invested a lot of time on is building relationship with national stakeholders. And also thinking ahead already about what kind of livelihood opportunities could the energy access support. Because as we probably all know, one thing is putting the supply chain and getting that up and running, but if there's no demand and no result for the livelihoods, then you're not setting yourself up for success. And finally, a lot of time was also put into attracting private sector partners that would be able to provide support with the EPC and the operations and maintenance, because of course this needs to be a sustainable model that is run by the private sector partner in this project. Over to the next slide. Some key lessons learned, and I'm very happy to be sharing this, but as I said, the regulatory environment, not ashamed to say we underestimated that. It turned out to be more complex than we thought, and I think it's very important here to find the right partners, in our case, legal firms, consultants who understood the energy market or the nascent energy framework in Ethiopia, who knew the right partners, international and national, who could help us navigate this space and also could make the introduction. So keep that in the back of your mind, very important, particularly in countries that are developing their framework as we speak, like Ethiopia. I think all of us are trying to do something quite pioneering in this space, right? Bringing market-based energy access to displaced settings. So it's very likely you'll have to repivot along the way. We certainly, came up with multiple concepts before we finally landed, and you need to be prepared for unexpected situations. I mean, the civil war in Ethiopia was such a pivot point, so be prepared to repivot quickly. I think that's another key lesson. Energy capacity gap, I think we know it exists amongst the humanitarian institutions, technical and commercial thinking around energy solutions, but we also found it exists with the regulators. So keep that in mind when you're putting your project together. They need to be brought along the journey. They also do not master yet all the technicalities of bringing market-based solutions to displaced people. And in terms of attracting the right partners, we found that there are a number of private sector actors, EPC companies that are willing to step in, but they see the complexity of this and they're happy to kind of sell their stuff and then move on. Because, let's be honest, there is lower hanging fruit in rural communities. Displaced settings just add an extra layer of complexity. But we found that there are many companies as well that do want to commit to this, provided there is a plan for a scale-up, provided they see that there is a vision from the backers of this project to extend beyond the pilot, right? So I think that is very important. Keep that in mind. Do you have a vision? Do you have a plan? Do you have committed funders that are willing to take the extra step beyond the pilot? That's when you'll find the private sector partners you can rely on. We can move to the next slide. So in closing, I think what Emmanuel and I, we hope you take away from this is that we have an ambitious plan to become the leading humanitarian energy provider in Ethiopia. If all goes well, we should be the first commercially owned mini-grid licensee in the country. That is the next big milestone for the project. And it's backed by an ambitious 36-month roadmap with a number of partners, 2 business models, and 3 different locations in the Somali region. But really our vision is to, as I said, go beyond the Somali region. And for that, we'll need the help and support of more partners. And 3 key steps I would like to highlight, and this is hopefully a call for support from people in this audience and beyond. So first of all, we need more diversity in the capital mix. We have a good mix here of philanthropic capital and also private sector, but we're looking also at other impact investors, private sector investors, philanthropies who are willing to go the next step and expand beyond the Somali region. Regulators, they still need to put their signature under their commitments, so that is a key one, getting the license in place and making sure that the tariffs are supportive of the project. And finally, we need the commitment from the humanitarian actors. As Emmanuel explained, we're setting up a virtual ABC model where humanitarian actors will need to offtake energy for this model to work. This is also a big step for them, and we'll hope that they'll also be able to follow up on their commitments in this space. Thank you very much. That was it.
Many thanks, Emmanuel and Eva. Really, really inspiring to hear how such a bold collaboration are brought to this, and how the whole sector can learn really, and I wish you can scale. And we'll have a session after where we can go a bit deeper with questions. I will ask one to each panelist, and the public also will have some time to ask questions. It's a good opportunity for everybody, I think, to ask questions to those people. But the final speaker from us is Kevin Mwagi from GIZ. I will talk about mini-grid facilities in Turkana region in Kenya.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come and speak. Because of the questions, I'll say I came with a few more people, so that when I stammer, I'll just point to the group and then they will answer some of these questions. However, we are glad to be here today. So we could start. So my name is Kevin Mwangi, as said, from GIZ Kenya, working for the Energy Solutions for Displacement Settings project. And here we are looking at to promote market-based approaches for renewable energy project and access to electricity. So we have been working in the displacement settings, and specifically in Turkana County, and mostly in the Turkana West sub-county for since 2019. And we have built onto a project, and sorry, you could go on to the next slide. Okay, yeah, we are building onto a project that already started a while back, and this was a results-based financing project where we supported the development of mini-grids in 2 counties, and one of the county was Turkana County, and the developer there put up 2 mini-grids in the displacement settings, one in the settlement and one in the host community. Next slide, please. Our project is looking at 3 areas of cooperation, and one is in the policy, coordination, and capacity development. Here we are looking at promoting capacity, building the capacity of the Turkana County government and also the UNHCR in the coordination of energy activities in the humanitarian setting. We're also providing technical assistance to the UNHCR to green their infrastructure, both at the compound and also the field posts. And thirdly, the one that has brought us here is high-tire electricity access to households, businesses, and social institutions in the settlement and also in the host town. So the main area we are working on, as we continue to the next slide, is Kalobeye, and Kalobeye is an integrated settlement. And here we were looking at 2 things. One, the UNHCR developed a settlement that could put together both the host and the refugee communities. We find the host opted to live a little bit further from where the refugees were living, and so that's why we have 2 mini-grids there. And so we also have these 2 populations, catchment areas. One, the settlement has a population of around 44,000, while those are refugees, and the host town already having a population of around 2,000. As we go to the next slide, please. And so what we were building on is the RBF project, and probably this then will bring to the conversation of which models would work for the development of mini-grids in the humanitarian settings. So we will see that the money was provided by the UK government through FCDO, and this grant was channeled to NDEV, and GIZ already was providing the technical assistance. We already got a fund manager, Barclays Bank, who in Kenya is currently called ABSA, and ABSA now was able to give this money to the beneficiaries, and one of them was a private developer who is currently operating the mini-grid in Kalobeye. So 2 mini-grids were developed. One is a 60 kilowatt mini-grid that is serving approximately 500 customers, 300 being households, and 127, I think, being businesses. And then the other one is in the host town, and in the host town, we have approximately 120 connections. And and this is what we are building on. So as we continue to the next slide, please. And these are the nice pictures. So these pictures take us to ancient times. So this is what was there. Relic diesel generators, and somebody who was trying to play with a distribution board. So in the end, what we saw as we were coming in is that there was need for electrification. However, it was being provided by unregulated mini-grid operators who were operating some relic diesel generators, and also they did not care at all about safety with regards to how they supply their customers. And so an opportunity for somebody to come in and provide electricity that is reliable and sustainable through renewable energy resources was there. Next slide, please. So how did we do it in the RBF that you are building on? So the incentives were capped at 50%, but because of the do no harm policy, for Kalobeye, it was extended up to 82%. The market price or the cost reflective tariff was approximately 0.89 USD per kilowatt hour, but now with 82% subsidies, that was 30% capex incentive and 70% connection incentives. This we brought down to around 0.16 USD per kilowatt hour. So this is the current tariff that has been approved by the regulator to be used by the private operator of the mini grid. Next slide, please. So this is what we are changing from. We are changing from this diesel generator to clean and renewable energy. And we would like to say that the activities for expansion are ongoing. We have realized as the mini grid was being operated, the demand outstripped the supply. And therefore, the operator has been able to get funding to increase this 60 kilowatt mini grid. And currently, construction is ongoing for expansion of 544 kilowatt peak mini grid. As GIZ and as the ESDS project, we are also assisting this operator to build a distribution network. And this is also ongoing, and we also plan to connect an additional 2,500 homes, social institutions, and businesses in the settlement. Next slide, please. For the COVID-19, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a request by the UNHCR and also the county government of Turkana to provide supply of reliable electricity for medical services. In the end, we were able to connect 3 health institutions in the host and settlement, and also connected schools in the settlement that were also earmarked for isolation facilities. So in the end, we have had an advantage that now schools will be able to tap into digital learning and also access to reliable electricity for even extended learning hours, while also the medical facilities are able now to have reliable electricity for their activities, which include storage of vaccines and also, as it had been mentioned, the powering of autoclaves, etc. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what are the lessons learned? Planning to manage demand is one of the things that needs to be done on the onset. As we said, as the private developer or operator continued to manage this mini grid, the demand outstripped the supply. And there was a time that now diesel generation was being used a little bit more by the operator, which also now brings the question of the cost. Up to a certain time, we can say that they started curtailing, or they also started load shedding, and some part of the evening there was no availability of electricity. So we also need to include refugee and host communities while developing these projects, because then this brings about the buy-in and reduces the conflicts. There's also the regulatory framework. I could say that we have worked really closely with the national government and the Turkana County government in developing these projects, and this also has benefited the operations of the mini-grid operator. Next slide, please. I will just highlight 2 things, and these are the last 2 points, that productive use of electricity should be stimulated for sustainability of the mini-grids. Currently, we could say, like, for example, a bank is already connected. We can see the telecom towers in the settlement are connected to this mini-grid. And also there are businesses. There is welding machines. There is salons and also shops that are offering cold beverages, and which is really good. And also innovative ways of doing things. I think SNV are working on a productive, on electric pressure cookers, which we could also see as an opportunity for the mini-grid, and thus reduce the stresses on biomass cooking. innovative integration of generation plans for social institutions. And this is important because as we continue to understand, to realize is that humanitarian partners, when they go into the camps, they think, what do we require? And so they put their own solutions in place. So when a mini-grid comes, they realize, oops, there are people who have already captive power, and how do we integrate this? And a good example is, currently there's a 60 kilowatt mini-grid, and in the same locality, the Red Cross have a hospital that has a 50 kilowatt installation. So how do we put together these two so that all of us could use electricity, and we could also, when there is low demand from the institutions, for example, during the weekends, that this could also be used by the businesses, for example. So this needs to be looked at and also discussed, and how best we could go about this. I could already probably, as I finish, talk about that pole. As GIZ, we are also proud that we have used sustainable poles. So this is an eco pole that uses bamboo and has a plastic outer casing. And we're really proud of doing this, although a little bit expensive, because again, it promotes some sustainability, and we are supporting the mini-grid operator in also installing this. Thank you very much. I hope to hear from you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you all the panelists. Very great variety, I think, of projects and ideas which we are discussing here to see how we can scale up, really. And some important, I think, words came up and link up to the previous previous panel with the high-level speakers. You know, livelihoods is key in humanitarian. It's not just about giving people electricity, it's about giving opportunity to change their lives, and mini-grids can do that. But we heard about the limitations to do this in a scale which involved all the refugees. And we heard about anchor loads linking up to humanitarian operations and markets. So I have a round of questions for the speakers, starting with Richard. And so Richard, you know, great to hear from you, a private company who got into humanitarian. Of course, you started before in Rwanda in electrifying rural communities. But so two questions for you. You can answer with one answer. So what would be your main ask to the humanitarian sector, and what would you recommend your fellow entrepreneurs in the mini-grid sector to do if they had to enter the humanitarian setting?
Hello? Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I'd say, as I touched on in my presentation, I think the most important thing is to have a strong and committed partner that you can work closely with, and who can make it much easier to get access to the camp, to deal with the different stakeholders within the camp, and to help you liaise with the communities. As a private developer coming in from outside, that can, you can be viewed with suspicion. You definitely don't want to be seen as taking advantage of the population in the camps, nor of the situation. So it is most important to work closely with a partner that, that can help be that bridge, that connection with the community. So I'd say for the humanitarian actors, it would be to be open and be interested in different models, in different ways of operating, and to build closer ties with different private companies.
Great. And what would you say to your colleagues in the private sector? Would you recommend them to get involved in humanitarian?
Yeah, I would. Mahama is less of a town, it's more of a city, it's huge. And as pointed out in Kilobe, there are significant productive loads there. There are people running businesses, and there's a huge need, there's a huge demand for electricity. And it will take a lot of different people to come together to make this a reality. To build a mini-grid covering Mahama would be several $1 million, which is also why I think a combined approach makes sense, where you have smaller mini-grids to power productive use, and then separate DC mini-grids or solar home systems for household use. But yeah, I would definitely encourage my private sector colleagues to get involved.
Great, thanks Richard, thank you very much. So moving to the Shell and Mercy Corp's collaboration here, I mean, we heard a lot of the word partnership in your presentation. So I'm curious to really understand how this came to life. corporation like Shell, with Mercy Corps, and also with all the partners you mentioned. And also wanted to ask, maybe Emmanuel, you can answer to this, and then I wanted to ask Eva, what was the role of Shell, the motivation on being involved in this?
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. So Mercy Corps as an organization has a very long history of collaborating with various actors, CSOs, public and private sector actors. With Shell, our collaboration started around 2013, with this Enter Energy one around 2018. With this, what we see is that Mercy Corps brings its long history of working in humanitarian sectors, understanding communities, understanding humanitarian displacement settings, with Shell bringing in the capacity to convene market intelligence to really enable us in Ethiopia to navigate the ease of doing business, the regulations, and also most importantly to really design a very sustainable investment vehicle to deploy humanitarian solutions. For this, we see there still potential to really engage with other actors, other interested, like-minded, spirited individuals or organizations in this room. And of course, we have the MD of Humanitarian Energy sitting in the class, who will be speaking at 3:30. We would love to engage with you, love to speak with you. We believe there is still room for synergies and room for partnership on this journey. Thank you.
I hope this works, yes. Yeah, so Mattia, to your question, I'm responsible for the program Enter Energy. It's an initiative set up by Shell a couple of years ago, and we're working with Mercy Corps in Ethiopia on this project, but also with IOM in Mozambique on another one. So Enter Energy is a social investment initiative within Shell. It is part of the Shell PLC Group's strategy to power lives. And the majority of those initiatives have a commercial purpose, but what makes Enter Energy unique is that it is a non-profit initiative and it targets specifically humanitarian settings. So this is how Enter Energy is positioned internally within Shell, but we realize that we can't do this alone, right? Our goal is to find a proof of concept that demonstrates that market-based solutions are viable in humanitarian settings. That hasn't been done yet. It's very ambitious, and we know it takes a village, a community, a global community to make this work. So key to Enter Energy is being able to find the right partners, NGOs, INGOs, intergovernmental organizations, and of course the private sector players. And Shell's role is, yes, we provide the funding. We are here to de-risk the investment of smaller private sector players that may not be able to afford it, and also to provide the technical expertise where needed. And we're very lucky to have established the relationship with Mercy Corps in Ethiopia. But as I said, it takes a village, and we're not there yet, but we are very committed to do so.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you, Emmanuel. And before I ask my question to Kevin, I would ask to the public to start thinking about their questions, because in a couple of minutes we open the floor to all of you. So Kevin, I mean, you talked about, there were many ingredients in your presentation. You talk about, the different financing coming in, how the RBF worked out, the role of Barclays as a fund manager, the role of GIZ, and also the integration, how this allowed to integrate energy services and to bring them to both hosting communities in Kalobey and the refugees. But really, I mean, if you had to replicate this was one of the first mini grids in displacement, if not the first one, I think. And now the sector has moved, is moving. We heard this, new initiatives. So if you had to do this again or do it bigger, what would you do again? What were the ingredients of success which you think need to be replicated and scaled up?
One of them. Okay, thank you. I think one of them is we have to strengthen collaboration. The county government, the national government, UNHCR, private sector should already be in harmony as we continue to do these projects. And the reason I say this is because of also cost implications. I'll give an example. The land in Turkana is community land that is held in trust by the Turkana County government. So for you not to buy the land, you have to talk to Turkana County government. And in this case, they were able to give approximately 2 acres. That was really big for the first pilot, but now is the right fit for the expansion. So there is no cost for land, and therefore it reduces the cost. If we talk about the national government, is about the supporting framework, the policies and the regulations that need to be put in place for private sector to come in and also develop these projects. There is also discussions about cross-subsidies because public mini-grids are cross-subsidized by the government. But the question then becomes to what about private mini-grids so that we could already have a national utility tariff that is spread across both private and public mini-grid users. So some of these, I will say, will be those things that we'll need to carry on as conversations, building on the strengths that we have already done or already experienced. So its framework, its incentives and subsidies, and also trying to reduce the cost for private sector as low as possible to make these projects attractive, sustainable, to provide reliable electricity. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Kevin. Very clear, and I see Richard nodding, so yeah. It's good that the private sector agree with that. Okay, so I think we open it up with to the public now. Please, when you ask your question, introduce yourself and address the question to an individual panelist or even a couple of them. And I think the microphone is... everybody has his own microphone on the tables. So we can start. I can see one hand there. Please introduce yourself, and then one hand here. Please, the third behind there.
Now you can hear me.
Can hear you, yes.
Hi, Richard. I am Bakr Bahaj from the University of Southampton, UK. I've got a question to people who are actually doing mini-grids, and also perhaps a question around how these mini-grids to be expanded further. So the question is, how do you allow people who are at the base of the pyramid access electricity at the right tariff? Okay, and do you think the private sector will be able to recoup their investment based on income, which is very variable in these poor countries? Right, so there are really two questions in one. And with regard to the COSOB program, which I think one of your colleagues mentioned, that there is the mini-grid guidelines already being done by the regulator. I don't know whether you have completed that. That actually addresses the issue when the grid arrives, and it addresses the issue around private sector investment and how that could be taken up by the government if need be. So let me know, how much are your projects still dependent on grants, and how much they are dependent on income that you actually generate, please?
Great, thanks. I think we take a couple of questions and then we answer them. I think, yes, please.
Giles Bristow from Ashton. Fantastic presentations, thank you all. I wonder if you could just tell us a bit more about how you promoted jobs amongst the refugee community themselves within the projects. So how you recruited those, how you provided training and that kind of thing. Thank you.
Thanks, great questions. I think we take a last one and then we start answering those ones. I think it was first that, sir there, sorry.
Thank you so much, the presenters. John Paul here from Uganda, and I would like to direct my question to Mwangi from GIZ. I'm interested in knowing how we look at supporting the private sector beyond the project financing, especially where we do subsidies for probably refugee households to purchase, for example, solar equipment. And I think this one has also been undertaken by Mercy Corps, because in most cases, when the project funding ends, you find that we have the activity stalling, and yet it is making a contribution towards probably electricity access or energy access for our households. So I'm trying to think through with how we can look around and continue the initiative beyond the project financing in most of the projects where we have some of these activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can start from this last question, Kevin, since it was addressed specifically to you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, on project funding, I think our experience has been, one, if we could get CAPEX or even connection subsidies at the beginning of the project, but then so that it brings the tariff down to a level that is affordable to these customers, then will be a way to go at first. That will be my first point. And then secondly, probably promoting what has been called, and we continue to promote productive use of energy, so that we come out from what we are saying, dependency to empowerment. So that now when they are empowered, both the host and the refugee communities, then they are able to afford this electricity. When we move towards this kind of empowerment, then we will find that these mini-grids will be sustainable. However, we'll say, and I will continue to reiterate, that at cost-reflective tariffs, then the operators will have a challenge. Subsidies will be required for now for these mini-grids to be operational and also to be sustainable. However, let's promote empowerment for sustainability to the end. I think that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And maybe going back, this links up a bit to the first question we had from the professor. And it's really like, how can we meet at the bottom of the pyramid? How can this be affordable? How we can move beyond grants? And I mean, I'm curious to hear as well, because I think none of the presenters talked about refugees actually paying for the energy services. The mini-grid is an infrastructure which needs an anchor load, and then can be paid back also by some of the productive activities. I think in the rural Africa there is a debate about subsidies to make them in the right fees as just rural electrification plants are the same way. But I would be curious to hear from maybe either Richard or Emmanuel, if you have any view on whether there is a possibility for refugees to pay for electricity for mini-grids, and if so, what would be needed to get there? Please, Richard.
Cool. Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for the question. Yes, subsidy is required. I mean, energy is pretty much always subsidized for end users. I would say that the anchor model helps reduce the tariff that you need to charge, and it helps make the project viable. Let's say to charge a tariff to UNHCR, which means they pay the same as they did on diesel, doesn't mean we can give electricity to the rest of the camp for free. It means a tariff which is still much higher than the national grid. To get it to grid parity, you would either need to charge, like have UNHCR pay more money and have them deliberately cross-subsidize the end user connections, or the funding needs to come from somewhere else, whether it's international donors or development agencies. Right now, the connections that we have in Muhammad do pay, and right now that pays for the extra diesel that's consumed for the energy requirements, as well as the upkeep and maintenance of the grid. But yeah, the question is how low can you reduce the subsidy required? But I don't think we can completely get rid of subsidy. I don't think it's fair that someone in the city is getting subsidized electricity, and yet you're expecting a refugee to pay the full economic cost of that power.
Yeah. And just to add, I also think there is a question on who should pay for that. Should the governments pay as if they are paying for city users, or should be part of the humanitarian sort of investments in humanitarian operations? So I think there is an opportunity there as well to link those two. I think we have an important question about jobs and recruitment in refugees, and the opportunity that mini-grids brings there from Ashton. So maybe Emmanuel, you want to answer that?
Yes, so job creation, livelihood improvement is very critical, and this could be looked at from various phases of the mini-grid development and operation. So you are looking at, even within construction phases, how much more you can involve local talent, local skills in this. Just to let you know that this has to be situated into, for example, government regulations around the right of refugees to work, which is kind of a bit very kind of accepted a lot in Ethiopia and some other countries. We also see that from our assessments, most of these refugees really do have skill sets. We found electrical engineers in these camps. We found people who have degrees, enough skill sets that could be used. And we intend to integrate a lot of this during the construction phase. It also fits into our local content policy under this particular project, using local material, local talent, local financing as much as possible. Of course, once operation is in vogue, you want to make sure that you are engineering ability of people to use the energy as a conduit or as a catalyst for business activities. So we found ice cream making in these camps. We found a lot of people who are doing very fantastic stuff. Milling is very active in this particular camp. So these are opportunities and options that we intend to engineer, which is a key link or key component of this project beyond just the investment vehicle. Of course, you're looking at also most of these community members already retail to the other members using diesel generators already. So there is a lot of understanding of them of the value chain. So we intend to integrate some of these businesses who understand dealing with their own people much better into the operations side of the business, either retailing, credit cards for the energy units and all of that. So we are looking at a broad spectrum of opportunities that should allow refugees at least to be involved in the labor market of these locations. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And yeah, just maybe there is also a dimension of formal versus informal jobs, right to work, other regulatory aspects which are important to consider and that really matter and change context by context. I think we have time for another round of questions. I think there was, yes, lady there.
Yes, hello. Oh. Hi, my name's Elena Fanova from Arizona State University. My question was, especially to Richard at Mesh Power, but anyone that can speak to a private sector opinion, how is the private sector reducing risk in humanitarian settings, specifically for providing electricity, given that your customers are inherently transient? So what can be done to reduce project risk in that regard?
Thanks. Take another couple of questions. The lady there.
My name is Anne Nyambane. I'm with NOCAP as one of the energy experts. My question is, how do you compare the local impact that mini-grid have versus the kind of investment that like a private developer has invested in a mini-grid, and that should be beyond like the returns and investment return that a mini-grid developer actually puts on the mini-grid?
Sorry, I'm not. Perhaps I'm a bit. I don't hear very well. I couldn't hear. So can you repeat the question? Sorry, my colleagues here. Yeah.
So my question is, how do you compare the impact that a mini-grid has at a local like a community versus the kind of investment that a mini-grid developer has to put into the mini-grid to develop it, and that is beyond the investment return that a mini-grid developer gets from it.
So what's the impact per dollar put in? What's the value of our money? Okay. Third question, yeah.
My name is Klaus Strasser, working for UNHCR Djibouti, also in NOCAP Green Shift. My question goes to the analysis of the private sector company, so Richard Mesh Power. You mentioned you recommend actually to go for smaller grids when you talk about communities, or you think about that. So my question is, when do you, or what is the reason for that? Is it investment costs? Is it the unpredictability of the load compared to your base load scenario, when you offset and have actually a real business case? Or is it admin or political reasons? So I just would be interested in that.
Okay, thanks. So maybe Richard, we start with you with this question. And also if you could answer the first question, which was about, the risking. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. They're actually slightly related. So the reason why I recommended going for smaller systems is a big mix of factors. On the one hand, it's regulatory. In Rwanda, the requirements for a system 50 kilowatts and below is very different to a larger system. And getting the approval to build, let's say, a 2 megawatt system would be very, very different and difficult. So there's that aspect. The second is just about the overall financial viability. By having a smaller system that can serve the camp offices as well as the market needs, that's 1 or 2 small mini-grids. And the viability of those mini-grids is much greater than a larger mini-grid serving the full camp population. So by serving the economic hubs, you can charge lower tariffs, and you can make it more financially sustainable with less subsidy. Let's say to build a mini-grid in Mahama, let's say 10,000 connections, let's say $650 a connection. You know, that's $6.5 million. And there is, of course, huge risk for a number of reasons, including the transience reason, right? If this camp is not going to be here for another 5 years, there's basically no hope of making your investment back. There is a strong investment case for just providing power to the camp headquarters, to the clinic, to these anchor loads. That alone is financially viable, and you can pay it back within, let's say, 5 years, and that's one way of reducing the risk. But if you commit to building large infrastructure throughout the camp, then that's a huge increase in investment and risk, which most people are not willing to take on. There are efforts to de-risk that, and that includes efforts that Unitar and Shell have been doing into conceptualizing a de-risking framework, which would provide payout if you had to uninstall the system due to the camp closing. Or these camps go on a year-by-year cycle. You never have more than 1 year of certainty on the existence of the camp. The second point about, so I think I've touched on the transience of the camp itself. For the people within the camp, I'm less worried. Especially in Mahama, we've had huge amounts of repatriation of Burundians back to Burundi over the past year and a half. But they've actually been largely replaced by Congolese refugees brought from other camps in Rwanda, which have closed. Yeah. So we haven't had that huge turnover in particular connections. The market is busier than ever. So I'm not so worried about the internal transients within the camp. But I am certainly worried about, if the camp does close, then we will have to pack up and go.
Great, thanks. Thomas, do you have time to answer to the last question? 1 minute. I wanted to ask this to Eva, actually. And this is really since you are a founder, what's the impact which is coming out from this, and how do you see this compared to other investments for impact you can make? And also to bring it back on why we are doing this, it's really to change the life of refugees, and that's the impact I think we want to do. So how is that work?
Is it working now? Yes. And I think that's a very good question, because we need to look indeed beyond the impact of the return on investment for the private sector players. Clearly that needs to be there if we want this to be sustainable, if we believe this needs to be based on kind of market fundamentals. We all agree that the old model of giveaways is not sustainable. So there needs to be, on the longer run, a path to return for private sector investments like Mesh Power and others. But let's not forget the wider impact. And there was a study actually that we commissioned a couple of years ago called Access to More, together with Dalberg, that showed that every dollar invested in this space has the potential to generate $3 to $4 worth of broader impact. And there are a couple of obvious levers that contribute to that. One is, for example, the savings that refugees generate, because the access to clean energy has the potential of being cheaper versus the money they spend today on firewood, and other forms of less clean energy solutions. Another way, of course, in which this dollar investment generates a return for the wider community is because it gives them access to livelihood opportunities, right? The productive use of energy, those ice cream makers, those millers, once they have access to reliable energy, they can generate businesses, they can feed their families, they can expand, they can grow. So these are the financial returns which you can deduce and bring back to that dollar investment. But then, of course, there are the non-financial impact indicators, and they range from gender equality. I think Damilola in her introduction referred to some of the benefits of clean energy access, which include, of course, making sure kids get access to education. That is also translatable into a financial impact on the longer term. It also has to do with the safety of women and girls who are out there collecting the firewood and being exposed to unnecessary attention, let me put it that way. So definitely, absolutely, the impact has to and does extend beyond the return for the private sector investment. And as I said, this could amount to $3 to $4 per dollar invested in energy access solutions.
Great, thank. I think this was the perfect wrap-up of the session. We need to close it. I want to thank all the panelists. I've learned a lot. And yeah, great. And the floor goes back to Thomas, I think as an energizer for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, take your seat. Actually, before we go to the Energizer, and it will be quick, and it will be hopefully a little bit of fun as well. I wanted to, I forgot something earlier. This is not only about a conference where you can listen to the latest updates on humanitarian energy. We would also like to get something very concrete out of this, out of each session. And we have, for that, a couple of people in the room, also I take notes, and we want to also hear from you, what are the points that you just heard that you would like to explore further? We have in the GPA network, we have a work plan, we are working with the steering group members, we have what we call the Humanitarian Energy Network, expert network, so we have a number of opportunities to take questions that haven't been answered today into our GPA framework and work on it in the future. So we can do a webinar, for example, we can produce a paper. We heard about the question of de-risking. It's something we are working on already, and hopefully have some results soon. So anything you would like to hear in the future more about from our side, please note it down, come back to us, come to me in the post or whatever you like, or raise it now. Happy to take this on board and take it in our way of working. Go. Andrew.
So one of the great things about being here is that you move out of your silo. And almost everyone that I've spoken to has been talking about their own approach to innovative financing and their own partnerships with like the private sector. If we're actually serious about changing the way in which we work, can't we be looking at what makes sense globally in terms of innovative finance? Like rather than sort of like one agency going with theirs, another with theirs, and sort of figure out how do we crack this nut and sort of look at problems or challenges at a much more holistic manner, rather than sort of saying, this is UNHCR's problem, or this is IOM's problem, or this is whoever's issue. Because like what we're looking at is vulnerable populations who have either been displaced or who are hosting displaced or could be potentially displaced. So it's not just a fixed population, it's much bigger, it's almost all of, increasingly it's bigger and bigger populations. So also issues of carbon credits, like how can we access funds which are non-traditional, because we can't just keep going to the same donors of the same time. And so how do we look at this sustainability options as well? So this is, to me, I was writing and sort of saying, here's another innovative financing model. Like, we shouldn't be coming here to learn about this. There should be a community of practice out there where we're comparing and sort of figuring out how do we support each other rather than being in competition with each other on this. Thanks.
Exactly, yes, thank you, very good points. And on 2 points on your side, we have Energy Peace Partners here. So they are maybe could you stand up, Dave and Sherwin, and maybe Linda? They're working on exactly this idea of issuing a carbon credit system within the most fragile situations on this planet. So do talk to these guys, they are the experts. We also having, where we had in the past a couple of webinars already on innovative finance solutions. They are all on Energypedia. We will talk about this in a later session where we introduce what is the library of information already out there. So we don't have to reinvent many things, but you're right, we need to work on some concrete issues here. Okay, Energizer, before we go to the solar home systems, please stand up, go around in the room for 2 minutes and find someone you haven't talked to ever before, and understand who is he or she, and understand what he or she is doing.
And I'll also invite the next panelist to the stage to get ready for the panel. Thanks.
Sorry, guys, can you go back to your chairs, please? Yeah, we need a... Is there something on the phone that we can ring? Hello? Hello, hello, hello. Can we go back to the chairs, please? Yes. Yeah. Hello? Hello? Fully energized, but the question is, how do we de-energize you again? Can you take your seat, please? We need to find another energizer next time. Without further ado, I hand over to Laura.
Thanks very much, everybody. And just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Laura Clark from Practical Action, and I've been the project manager of the Renewable Energy for Refugees project for the last few years. As was mentioned in the framing of the first session, electrification in humanitarian settings is going to need a mix of solutions and funding structures. And in this session, we're going to look at some of the smaller off-grid energy solutions, solar home systems, and some of the appliances that go with that, and some of the business models that have been implemented in improving energy access, particularly for households and businesses in humanitarian settings. And in particular, we're going to be looking at how the private sector can be engaged in this space and how they can meet the needs of people living and working in these communities, what actually makes a business model viable and how does that differ from the host community, and examining some of the constraints of working in the humanitarian sector and what needs to be changed to address those. We're also going to look at the linkages between energy access, how these products and services can support income-generating activities and livelihoods opportunities. And we're also going to look into some of the lessons that can be learned from the case studies that the panelists are going to present today, how those can be applied in other contexts to reach that scale that we've been talking about in the opening sessions from today. So just to introduce the panelists from today, we've got Jean-Marie Twigere-Yezu from Belecom, who's been supplying solar home systems and electrical appliances in refugee camps in Rwanda for the last 3 years. We've got Dismas Kisulu, founder of Solar Freeze, a company that provides solar-powered cold storage units to off-grid communities. He's going to talk about his experience in Kenya. And then we've also got David Stonehill, who's going to talk about his experience of implementing off-grid energy programs in humanitarian settings and share some of the lessons learned from the application of market-based approaches in those settings. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jean-Marie from Belecom, who's going to start us with his presentation.
Thank you, Madam. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean-Marie, as she said. I'm from Belecom Limited, a local company from Rwanda. We are dealing with the business of construction materials, including plumbing, electricity, and the solar products. In 2019, we get the opportunity to have a partnership with the Practical Action and with NHCR to provide the solar home system in the 3 camp refugees, which are Kigeme, Nyabiheche, and the former Gihembe. With our business model, we opened the shop in each camp from 2019, and we started to sell the product. Those products was two types. The first one was a solar home system, which was affordable to refugee, and we facilitate them to pay them an installment of 6 months. And the second model, after 6 months, we had a revolving fund to support those who has the low financial capacity to initiate the small business and increase the financial capacity for getting the purchasing power and be able also to buy the solar home system. So the work we conducted in those 3 refugee camps, we started by the familiarizing with the camp, and we set up the outlet for those 3 3 camps. Also, we did the recruitment of the staff and trained them. And after, we did a market-based research, and we decided also to upgrading the solar home system from 12 watts up to 20 watts. Also, our shop in the refugee camp helped us to sell, to provide the solar home system easily, and do the service of after-sale services, which is the maintenance and repairs of the solar home system, which is needed. Then after, we started to set up the revolving fund, where I said we initiated the business for refugee by making the meeting and train them, and then after we provide the money. We provide the money for doing that business. Among the employees we trained 40 staff from refugee camp, but today we are using a half, which are 21 staff. Also, after starting the business, we got some problem, we got some challenges. You know that 2020 we get problem of COVID-19, but Belecom has established the contingency plan to solve this problem by using the online working, and we have been able also to work in these 2 years ago. Also, we had problem of spare parts and maintenance, which was costly high. Another big challenge we had was the reallocation of the camp. Everyone knows that the camp for Gihembe was shifted from the north up to east of Mahama. But we go with our customers in Mahama, and this time we are serving the service very well, and there's no problem. Also, another part from Kigeme was shifted also from Kigeme to Mahama, and today we are installed there to work with our customers.
Jean-Marie, just sorry to interrupt you. I think you're moving the slides as well, so if you want to... Oh, sorry, okay. So yeah, can you just move us on to the slides, because we've just gone back to the start? So can you just skip us through to which slide?
You need to ask them to move the slides.
Okay.
So yeah, if we can just get the right slide up on the screen, and then Jean-Marie can indicate to you when they need to change.
Okay, thank you. I was saying that the Belecom is a local company from here, Kigali, where we work also in three camps, which are Mahama, Kigeme, and Nyabiheke. We have the outlet there. I can go to the next. So,
it's okay. We saw these ones. If you just want to move us on and pick up where you got to, and then we'll carry on from there.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
For our location, we work before we reach to the camp. There was a problem of writing, and people was using the candle, was using the kerosene, which had the problem of cost, and also there was the problem of pollution. And that's why when we arrived there, we brought the system, we brought the solar home system for lighting and also reduce those problems of cost. And we thought that for the people who were not able to buy the solar home system, we established a model for revolving fund. Can you go to the next? So we had two products, which are solar home system and revolving fund. The solar home system was affordable because we thought to provide this solar home system and facilitate the refugee to pay an installment of 66 months. And as I said also for revolving fund, we were thinking that we will find the people who don't have the financial capacity, and we facilitate them to create the business and train them and fund them. On that, we had a seed capital of 64 million, and we used for the last 2 years. Can we go to the next? Yeah. So by arriving to the camp, we started by familiarizing with the administration, including the UNHCR, Practical Action, Minema. Also, we did the outlets, and we did also the awareness of the product, and we organized some events for informing the refugees that we brought our product. Also, we did the civil education program. Another activity we did is the administration and operation setup, where we recruit the staff from the camp, and we train them to work. Then after, we was working well with them. We was working with them. After some months, we started also to help them, the after-sales service, where we repaired the solar home system who had some problems, and we monitor the system of payment. Was not easy, and we did also, I'm sorry, I'm not looking well. I'm not reading well, sorry. So by that, also, we started the activity of revolving fund, where we said that those people who don't have the financial capacity, we can help them to increase their financial capacity and get purchasing power to buy the solar home system.
I think, Jean-Marie, so that we can stay on time, it would be helpful maybe if we could move to some of the achievements and some of the lessons learned from your experience, if we could just make sure that we finish on time for this section.
Yeah, for our experience, we did some achievements where up to now we come to sell more than 2,500 solar home system, and for the evolving fund also we come to disperse 71 million for 62 groups and 719 customers. For the lesson learned, there is a market-based approach where we learned that we needed to do our business focusing on the need of refugees. As I said, we upgraded the solar home system from 12 to 20 watt. And also there is a sustainability key lesson where this time we do well the after-sales services, and we brought the new products such as lamp, solar lamp, and some torches. So for those people, they can spend less money to get that light, like a torch. It is easy. Also, for these 3 years we worked in the camp, we have the partnership key lesson. We know where that with the Practical Action and UNHCR, we don't have problem with them or to any stakeholders in the refugee camp. Also, we have been adaptation to the key lesson, where we worked with everyone, even in at time of the COVID-19. We are familiar with everyone, so that is also a lesson. Another lesson is the skills and the leadership. You know that we said that we train the staff, but also we have some groups for revolving fund. Those people, there is a chairperson, there is a secretary, there is a treasurer. For those groups, it's a skill they get from us, and even for us, it is a lesson learned. Yeah, I think that is those one. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Great, and I think if we move on to the next presentation, then we'll field some questions once we've heard from the 3 panelists. Dismas, over to you, thank you.
Hi, is the slide up? Hi everyone, my name is Dismas Kisilu, founder and CEO of SolarFreeze. SolarFreeze is primarily working in Kakuma refugee camp, and on to my next slide, please. We realized that access to productive use assets, such as refrigeration and cold storage, are quite difficult to find, not only in the refugee camp, but across the board in Kenya. So we're a pioneering company in terms of access to refrigeration and cooling through a pay-as-you-go model. And on my next slide, you'll see that Kakuma is a place that is buzzing with activities. Currently, it has over 160,000, a population of 160,000, and over 2,000 small businesses serving the population with their daily needs. And once you're in Kakuma, you'll realize that the place is really super hot, and a lot of businesses rely on energy to do a lot of things. But the challenge is that diesel is the main source of energy, and this is primarily provided by generators that have like small wiring systems that power small businesses, mainly from 7 p.m. to at least 9 p.m. at night. So they are the primary mode of providing energy in the refugee camp. And what SolarFreeze does, and you'll see that on my next slide, please, is provide access to refrigeration and cooling through a chest freezer, which is a 3-in-1. So by 3-in-1, I mean it's a cooling system. It's a 200-liter system, and also it has a USB port where we provide free bulbs that you can charge through the freezer. And also it comes with auxiliary batteries. If, for example, you have surplus energy, you can charge the batteries and use it for anything else. So we have seen the small businesses that we are serving move from an income of at least $25 to 45 based on just providing our solar-powered refrigeration unit. So next slide, please. So our product, as I mentioned, is a 3-in-1 pioneering system, which is a pay-as-you-go. And small businesses love it because they pay as little as 5,000 Kenya shillings a month. They don't have to pay us cash upfront. And this goes on to a period of between 12 to 18 months, which is very ideal if you are saving money. So the alternative for them is AC freezers that you'll see in Kakuma. A lot of small businesses have AC freezers. So SolarFreeze currently is in process of onboarding these AC freezers and replacing them with DC freezers. And we are doing this through providing a 30% discount on the fully solar-powered system. So we are currently flooded with a wait list of small businesses that want to take on our product. And on our next slide, you'll see practical businesses such as even small clinics that are offering storage of things, critical vaccines and medications that are being stored there. And our most successful businesses are small and medium-sized kiosks, restaurants, clinics. The pay-as-you-go is one of the things that attracts them to it, and also the 3-in-1 service. And we are seeing a lot of them using the extra energy to charge the batteries that they can use even in other home use systems, such as their TVs and stuff like that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we have a token system that is embedded on the freezers. We send a 9-digit code based on how the businesses want to pay. Most of them are paying on a monthly basis. And we send this via SMS, and they are able to key in the 9-digit code, which has been the primary method, and it helps us also scale up much faster. Next slide, please. So our competitive advantage is our pioneering pay-as-you-go storage system that is the first of its kind in the market. And also the fact that we are replacing the diesel-powered generator, sort of energy. We did a survey where we noticed that the cost of an average business is around 8,000 Kenya shillings in a month for them to access energy, mostly from the diesel generators. So SolarFreeze is doing this by providing a 5,000 Kenya shilling unit on a monthly basis. And also on top of this is a 3-in-1 system, so you can, it has USB ports where you can light your shops, and also we have a battery that can be used for other services if you need extra energy for that. So we also have a training program where we realize that in case our units have technical issues, we train a lot of refugees. Currently, I'm happy to report that 100% of our staff in Kakuma are all refugees. And the training program is focused towards maintenance, troubleshooting, and operating their solar power chest freezers. And it equips them with technical skills and hands-on skills. This is not only practical for solar freeze, but also for other home lighting use companies and solar companies. So we train on a wide range of fields, from solar-powered cooling to solar-powered home lighting systems. And right now, we have trained 100 young refugees that we hope will be used in other sectors within the renewable energy space. So next slide, please. Our team is made up of myself and 21 others, and we are happy to report that our core focus is on renewable energy. And on the next slide, please. Yeah, so the key learnings that we have learned so far is that new business models can be easily scaled, and with good partners who some of them are here, like Ashden, which is there, that have supported our work in Kakuma and made our work be on the spotlight. We hope that we'll get more long-term partnerships that will enable us to scale. And also, we have learned that training more people within the community that can troubleshoot this equipment is critical. So access to green skills such as renewable energy, technical maintenance, and operation is something that we at Solar Freeze see as a big thing. And providing solutions that actually focus on a practical challenge such as cooling and refrigeration. So because our solution targets an area that is very hot and where even small businesses are not even able to access conventional forms of energy, we provide a practical solution. So having a practical solution in refugee camps is quite easy to scale, because most of our solutions are owned by businesses that want to actually pay and are ready to pay for our solution, because the alternative is diesel power generated energy, which is very costly for them. So the cost, as I mentioned, is 8,000 Kenya shillings, and we have reduced that to 5,000 Kenya shillings. And even with access to diesel as an alternative, right now in Kenya, we're seeing a lot of lack. There's a huge fuel shortage, and the price of diesel has gone really up. So that also provides an incentive for a lot of small businesses and institutions to want to buy Solar Freeze equipment so that they can have alternative energy. And going forward, we hope to replace the conventional AC freezers that are diesel powered to DC freezers that are solar powered. So our program will focus on giving a 30% discount and enabling more businesses to come on board and replace their old freezers, and new businesses to start and generate revenue within the refugee camps. So that's it from me, and I hope to hear more questions and more feedback from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dismas. And if I can just hand over to our last panelist, David, for the last presentation for this session.
Thank you, Laura. Can we pull up the first slide? So my name is David Stonehill. I'm here today representing Power Africa. If you've never heard of us, we're a U.S. government-led energy access partnership that's housed within USAID. Next slide, please. So just a quick recap of Power Africa's contributions to the humanitarian energy space. In 2018, we funded the Smart Communities Coalition, or the SCC, along with MasterCard. I think most of you know about the SCC or are involved with it. It's a coalition of about 75 different members committed to delivering energy access, connectivity, and digital tools with to refugee communities with a private sector-led service delivery focus. In partnership with GIZ and NDEV, we created the SCC Innovation Fund, which awards grants to test new business models that either fall under energy access, connectivity, or digital tools, or a mix of those. The second window of the Innovation Fund opened last week, and we're currently accepting applications. And we just awarded 2 grants, totaling about $850,000 to solar mini-grid developers in Uganda's Ruamwanja refugee settlement. And also we provided about $700,000 in de-risking grants so that 3 solar home system companies could enter 2 refugee settlements in Uganda. Next slide, please. So in terms of lessons learned, my time is short today. So the first thing I want to do is point you all to 2 resources which will be linked in your agendas. One is a white paper that summarizes finding and recommendations from 13 different humanitarian energy access projects. It was produced by a team of graduate students from Columbia University on behalf of the SCC. And the other resource is a pilot playbook that the SCC created that evaluates our solar home system de-risking project in Ugandan refugee settlements. It offers lessons learned, and it lays out a sort of roadmap in the hopes that other organizations will replicate similar programs in other displacement settings. So I'd encourage you all to check out those resources. And I'm going to mention 2 lessons learned highlighted in Columbia University's white paper. So the first is that if off-grid solar companies want their businesses to be sustainable in displacement communities, they can really only rely on relatively wealthier households with stable income or productive use of energy customers, for example, e-mobility companies or chicken hatcheries or internet cafes or clinics, etc. The business model seems to work really well when it comes to customers who already have income generating activities, but things really start to fall apart as you move down the pyramid to lower income households with lower levels of affordability. And I realize this is not a novel or shocking lesson learned. This is a challenge that mirrors the challenge we see in the off-grid solar sector writ large. That supply-side subsidies will only get you so far, and as you move down the pyramid, you reach a point where market prices stop working, and that's where demand-side subsidies need to kick in. But in displacement settings, this challenge is magnified, right? It's exacerbated, because in displacement settings, the bottom of the pyramid isn't just the sliver of the pyramid, it's a majority of the pyramid. So you have 2 options to deal with this. One option is that you have demand-side or consumer-facing subsidies that buy down the cost of the energy product in perpetuity, and everyone becomes addicted to that subsidy, and I don't think any of us want to see that approach. The other option, and I would say this is my action item, is that consumer-facing subsidies are there, but they're treated as temporary, and they're paired with other complementary economic growth activities like vocational training or job fairs or small grants to start businesses. So the call to action is that we really have to find more ways to pair energy services with livelihood stimulation. The other lesson learned is that unexpected partnerships are the best kind of partnerships. So the SCC has played a really important role, I think, in bringing together very different types of organizations through matchmaking sessions, and then organically interesting things start to happen. And some really unique consortiums have formed to implement grants under the SCC Innovation Fund. So for example, in Uganda, Farmers Savings and Credit Group has joined forces with a solar installer to develop a solar-powered egg incubator for a communal chicken hatchery. Or in Kenya, we funded a consortium that includes an e-mobility company, a local university, and a solar equipment supplier to deploy electric 3-wheeled bikes in that displacement community. And so with the next round of the SCC Innovation Fund that just opened, we're really looking forward to seeing more of these kinds of creative collaborations. So I could say a lot more, but I will stop there and leave time for further discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And before we sort of open the floor, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to each of our panelists, starting with Jean-Marie, and you described Bellicom's operations and that you were already established in the host community in various sectors before you started working on this project. Could you maybe share some reflections on the differences between working in the host community and entering the humanitarian space, and what adaptations you incorporated into your business to move into that space?
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, we started in 2019, and we realized that working in the host community and in a refugee camp is different, totally, because when you see in a refugee camp, they are in one side, they are in the center, it is like in town, and they have stable income, monthly, even if it is low, but it's stable. But working in a community environment, you see how the population stay. You can move even a sector or a district. It is harder than coming in the center. That's what I realized. And also on the income, you realize that it's different. Some wait the harvest, and other have the basis monthly. It's what I can say on it.
Thanks very much. And were there any adaptations that you made in entering the refugee space or entering the camp specifically that helped you overcome those differences?
So this needed the business model, which are different. The way you work in the camp, it's not the way you use outside. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And maybe if I can ask a follow-on question to yourself, Dismas, actually, when you were establishing your operations in Kakuma, what did you see as the biggest risks, and how did you overcome them, and what recommendations would you make for others trying to enter that space with the types of products and appliances that you offer?
Sure. So for us, when we started working in Kakuma, the biggest risk was automatically the fact that a lot of them are looking towards moving to other countries as part of their main goal. So how we mitigated this risk is that SolarFreeze primarily works with small businesses that are there long-term. So 100% of our clients are small and medium-sized businesses, and some of them are institutional clinics that are working there. So we focus on those businesses because they serve the community in turn. So maybe in the long term, we are going to figure out a way whereby directly we are going to be working with those refugees in terms of them accessing the SolarFreeze technology within their homesteads. But the most effective way for us currently, because our asset is a productive use asset, helping small businesses generate more revenue and reduce their reliance on diesel-powered energy, is that we are working with businesses, and this is more sustainable for us and even for the community as refugees to interact with SolarFreeze.
Thanks very much. And I think one of those interesting reflections and the links between the energy access and livelihoods is, on the one side with the Bellicom model, we've got a scheme through the revolving fund to do income generating activities to help with affordability, and then on the sort of other side of the coin, you've got providing energy access to boost incomes and livelihoods opportunities. So the two go together in both of those case studies and those models. And maybe, David, if I could ask a follow-on question to you, is you mentioned about supply side and demand side subsidies and financial support. Have you got any reflections or recommendations on how that can be most effective, or what helps to really make that work? Any lessons learned in that area?
Sure. So the supply side subsidies, I think, are that's the easier side of the coin, right? You're basically trying to figure out, it's a budgeting exercise. You're trying to figure out, what does a solar home system company need in order to enter a displacement setting that they wouldn't otherwise enter without donor support, right? So what is that? It's sales agents, it's setting up a sales office, it's a warehouse for inventory, transportation, fuel. You add all that up, and that's the subsidy. The way that we typically do it is we work through milestone-based grant payments. So we never give the money up front, but you have to first open the store to get the first tranche, and then sign up X number of customers to get the next tranche, and that way our investment is de-risked, and also there's greater incentives for the energy company. So this is what we did in Uganda with three companies: Bright Life, Engie, Phoenix, which is now Engie, and Solar Now, and it went pretty well. 4,000 new household electricity connections, 285 jobs created. But there are also some challenges, especially because COVID hit during that time. And so the three companies are still there. They're still in those displacement settings. But one of them has stopped doing pay-as-you-go and is only doing cash sales because of the credit risk. So success is not always guaranteed. In terms of the demand-side subsidies, the consumer-facing subsidies, where you're actually buying down the cost of the product, that's a lot harder. And we're not directly involved in any demand-side subsidy programs in refugee settings right now. I think there are some pilots out there, but we have been experimenting with different models for communities outside of refugee camps. So and we know what models work, and so I think one of the changes we'd like to see is an application of those facilities in refugee settings. So for example, here in Rwanda, we work closely with NDEV and the government of Rwanda to set up the Pro-Poor results-based financing scheme, which targets poor households. Quickly, the way it works is in Rwanda, there are 4 socioeconomic categories based on income levels of households. And so you do a very comprehensive survey to figure out what is the ability to pay for energy on a monthly basis in each of those categories. Then you compare that to the market cost of an off-grid solar product, and you basically subtract to figure out your demand-side subsidy. So in Rwanda, they use a percentage, but it's capped at a certain amount. The companies execute the sale, submit a voucher to an accredited financial institution, and get their money back. So that's the type of model we know that can work. There's other ways to do it as well, but we need to see more of these in refugee settings, because, as I said, the bottom of the pyramid in these communities is a much bigger chunk of the overall pyramid than in other situations.
Great, thank you very much. And I think, yeah, we're still on track to have time from the audience and questions from the rest of you out there. So the floor is open. Please feel free to raise your hands and go for it. The person I saw first was the lady with the black jacket at the back.
Hi, and thank you. Thanks to everyone for the interesting presentations. I am Marilena from TTA, Trama Tecnoambiental. I wanted to ask, triggered from the presentation of Jean-Marie, if you actually thought about distributing solar home systems for productive uses of energy, or like larger systems, and if not, why do you stick to the smaller ones? And the other point is that for me, it's very interesting to hear about the revolving fund, that you have a very positive experience. And I wanted to ask David if this was also assessed by Power Africa, especially for the bottom of the pyramid users. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And as before, maybe if we take a couple of questions and then we can get the participants, panelists to wrap them up. Another question on the same table.
Okay, my name is Bahaj. I am from the University of Southampton, UK. Solar home systems are really good if the appliances you're going to use there are highly efficient. So I just want to ask our colleagues from Kenya and also from Rwanda, what experience they had in relation to the appliances themselves. Do they require a lot of maintenance? Do they fall away after 2 years, 3 years, and so forth? And to David, what is an accredited financial institution? How do we find them?
Okay, and then I think I saw Amare raising his hand as well, if you want to.
Thank you very much. My name is Amara. I'm from UNHCR Kigali. Well, actually, solar home systems are very popular in the camp, and most refugees, they not really this familiar with this technology. And yet the coverage is very low. And perhaps I will ask really why, what are the key barriers for full scale up in the camp level? Thank you.
Okay, maybe if I could ask the first question first to Jean-Marie about the sizing of your solar home system and whether you considered larger solar home systems for PUE purposes and sort of your product offering in that space.
Thank you. Maybe I didn't give the details, but for the solar home system we provided to refugee camp, before it was 12 watt and we upgraded to 20 watt, and we were selling at 93,500 francs. As I mentioned on our sustainability, we provide other items for solar home system, where we provide another type for 70,000 and another for 45, the lamp torch at 25,000 and the torch also at 6,000. So we said we know where that the refugee have the different financial capacity and their purchasing power. That's why we thought about it. And for the big one, we worked with the Energy for Impact for providing some solar home system which are bigger than the one we have in a contract with the Practical Action and UNHCR. That's why I can say on it.
And maybe you could say something about the second question we had, which was about the after-sales support that you apply for the appliances and how you keep those working and what you offer in terms of after-sales services and technical support for your customers.
Yeah, as we said, we have a shop on the all refugee camp. That shop has also the room for workshop. So we have a technician. We have two type of workers, employees. Some work on sales and recovery, and the other also work on technically. So we have a warranty for 6 months that we do for free for repairing and maintaining everything for this refugee who still have the contract for paying this one. So we don't charge anything.
Great, thank you. And maybe the same question to Dismas about the after-sales support and the technical support that you apply that you have for your appliances and how your customers access that in the camps.
Yeah, sure. So one thing we realize is that access to technical support is very critical, and what SolarFreeze does is provide training it's free for 4 months. So together with the technical university, we onboard, like it's a peer learning program whereby the engineering students from the university, they come and then provide a hands-on technical training. So that gives us a boost on the ground for technical support, just in case we have troubleshooting issues. And also in terms of also the quality of the products, we make sure all of our products are Kenya Bureau of Standards certified and also the Global Leap certified. So all our products are certified in terms of that. So in case any technical issues come up, we also have a 2-year warranty and a 10-year warranty for our compressors. And having technicians on the ground helps us, on top of having quality products to sell to the consumers as well.
Great, thank you very much. And then maybe, David, if I can come for you, you had a question about the revolving fund. And I've written down AFI, but I forgot already what AFI stands for. So maybe you can remind me what that stands for as well.
So, a little clarity on which revolving fund. Is it the
Bellicom one, yeah,
okay.
whether you considered that in your studies, yeah.
Right, so as I said, we assessed 13 different humanitarian energy access projects through this white paper that was conducted by Columbia University. I don't have them all committed to memory, my apologies, so I'm actually not sure if that was one of them, but I can get you an answer immediately after the session. Maybe Jean-Marie knows, I'm not sure. But it is, revolving funds are definitely one of the models that seems to be appropriate for refugee communities. I think where they really work well is solarization of diesel generators, you know, including humanitarian agencies that have a lot of diesel generators. So there's an upfront cost to switch out the energy system, but you'll hit your payback period pretty quickly, you know, 1 or 2 years, and then after that, you can plow all those savings back into a fund to keep purchasing more and more solar systems until eventually you have no diesel generators. So the model is definitely a good one in certain cases.
And the other question was about accredited finance institutions and how we access them and how they fit into this model overall.
Accredited finance institutions.
Was that the right thing? Was that what an AFI was? Did I get that right? That was a question. Accredited finance institutions, was that the question you were asking about?
That was correct.
Oh, I got it.
Can we elaborate on the question a little bit?
So you mentioned that you have these institutions that allow you to, for people to take a voucher to and perhaps get funding. So I wasn't really sure how that really works. I remember in our projects in East Africa, we couldn't get a financial institution to allow to have soft credits and things like that. So from your learning, perhaps we could identify some way of going about it.
Yeah, so in my remarks, the accredited financial institution I was referring to is a microfinance bank in Rwanda that received the accreditation to essentially run the results-based finance program, the pro-poor results-based finance program. And they served as a clearinghouse, essentially, for the payment vouchers to validate every receipt submitted by the solar home system company and then pay them back using government funds. They were World Bank funds, but essentially government of Rwanda funds. So that's one example of where a microfinance bank can play a role. But generally, we, you know, in displacement settings and beyond, we're really pushing for microfinance institutions to play a greater role in consumer financing for off-grid solar. You know, in terms of lending, it's, you know, it's mostly been the large international development finance institutions that loan to the companies, but we see local microfinance institutions as really just not having a lot of knowledge about the sector and being a little hesitant to get into the game, not because it's not viable, but for lack of knowledge. Their comfort zone seems to be, you know, lending for things like, you know, tractors and that sort of thing. And so we've just done a lot of matchmaking and partnership brokering around the continent to get local MFIs more involved in off-grid solar.
Great, thanks. And maybe before I hand back over to Thomas, we could have some quick reflections on Amare's question, which are about what are the barriers to scale and uptake, and maybe if I could put that quickly to each panelist, starting with Jean-Marie. What do you see from your side as a solar home system supplier? What do you see as the barriers to greater uptake and greater scale, particularly with your customers in the refugee camps that you're working in?
As I said, we are familiar with the customers, with our strategy. A recovery agent has like 100 customers, between 100 and 120. So we know their feedback, and we are working well. 80%, they are satisfied of our service, and we know that there is the 20 who are not satisfied. So in the business, we need to try to see how to maximize the satisfaction for our customers. We know that they are vulnerable and they are refugees. We try to work together and understand them. That's why we said that we had a market-based research for their needs and their capacity. So this time we are closely working with them. And due to COVID-19, we have a contingency plan. And this day, 90% of employees, they are from refugees. So for us, that's the strategy we had. And we are sure that we'll continue to stay with them and satisfy them according to their needs and their capacity.
Thanks very much. And yeah, the same question to yourself, Dismas. What do you see as the barriers to scale and greater uptake of your products and services?
Yeah, sure, that's a good question. So before we got into Kakuma, we were working on solar-powered refrigeration systems that were not pay-as-you-go, because getting productive use assets to have pay-as-you-go technology is it's something new in the market. That technology has been well scaled in the home lighting system area where the energy is not that intensive, but for high energy productive use assets such as refrigeration and cooling, pay-as-you-go wasn't there. So for us, that was a huge barrier, but right now, because we have figured that out, and with the data around what businesses are paying currently for the diesel-powered energy, they're paying 8,000 Kenya shillings, and combining that with our solar-powered pay-as-you-go technology, now they'll be able to pay 5,000 Kenya shillings. And also onboarding their old freezers, which were AC now to DC, through a 30% discount will enable us to scale much more effectively. So we are looking forward towards cracking that with those things that I've mentioned earlier.
Great, thank you. And same question to David for some final reflections on that.
Yeah, I would say that what we've seen is that private solar home system companies and productive use of energy companies, they really want to be more active in these refugee settings. One, because it's the right thing to do, and two, because these places are vibrant economic hubs with a lot of economic activity going on. But these companies aren't going to do it unless a solid public-private partnership model is on the table. And you know, there's some examples that exist, but I think as Andrew pointed out earlier, there are just too many disparate pilots. There need to be national level programs or continent-wide programs that companies can join up with. Once that's in place, then I think also we need to take a more nuanced approach to how the business model is structured. You need both supply side and demand side subsidies. And of course, as I said earlier, if you do have a demand side subsidy that's actually buying down the cost of the product, you also need to work cross-sectorally and pair that with some sort of economic growth activity that is stimulating livelihoods and income generation and ensuring that people are able to steadily move up the energy ladder so that they're not dependent on those subsidies forever.
Thanks very much. And I would like to wrap up the session there and say thank you very much to all of our panelists for their presentations and for responding to your questions. And thank you to you as participants and for asking such great questions to the panelists here. And I'll hand over to Thomas to wrap us up. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. I'll be very brief and you can stay for the minute. I'm not trying to really cover everything what we said, but I think what comes down again and again is it's not a lack of technology that we were talking about, right? What's blocking us? It's also not a lack of companies, as David just said. There are good companies out there, the good partners out there. I think it's key. We heard a couple of key points that I want to mention, and that's also something we want to take into account in our work plan. We talked in the first session, especially around the anchor model. We are working on this since 2 years already. I think we know a lot, but we still need to see the progress on the ground on this point. Job creation, productive use is important. We talked about de-risking. I think this is an underserved point in the entire sector. Then this interesting question about impact. I think this is something probably we need to tackle a little bit outside the technical field, rather looking at socioeconomic side. Then we talked about models, PPP models, de-risking also in terms of solar home systems. And I think a last very important point is also the microfinance institutions. We need to bring them closer to our sector. So thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mattia. Thank you to the other panelists already. We've got a lunch break now. This is in the Soko restaurant downstairs. You will get a voucher you've got it already? Oh, see, perfect. So you have your voucher already. And then we see each other back at 1:20, I guess, Amy, right? So, to be right on time. And then for the skills and data session. Have a good lunch. Bon appetit.